What if I told you the Industrial Revolution, often celebrated as humanity's greatest leap forward, was powered by greed, exploitation, and unimaginable wealth? By the end of this video, you'll discover how the world's wealthiest men turned innovation into empires and why their methods left scars that still linger today. But the real question is, was it brilliance or ruthlessness that built their fortunes? Stick around because you're about to find out. The Industrial Revolution, a time of extraordinary progress and unimaginable greed. While the world celebrated innovation, behind the scenes, a new breed of tycoons was rewriting the rules of wealth and power. But at what cost? It all began in the late 18th century, a period when humanity stood on the cusp of a transformation unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just a moment in time, it was an explosion of change that would ripple across continents, reshaping economies, societies, and the very fabric of life. At its heart was the steam engine, a marvel of engineering that turned heat into motion. Inventors like James Watt refined this technology, giving it the power to drive machines and forever altering the pace of production. For the first time, goods could be manufactured on a massive scale, meeting the needs of a growing global population. But progress came with a price. Coal, the lifeblood of this new era, was extracted from deep within the earth by men and children working in dangerous, back-breaking conditions. The demand for raw materials skyrocketed, leading to environmental destruction and a grueling cycle of labor that benefited a select few. Factories, the new hubs of production, sprang up in cities and towns, creating jobs but also introducing harsh realities. The factory floor was a place of relentless activity, where workers toiled for hours on end, often in unsafe and dehumanizing conditions. Wages were low, and the promise of a better life remained elusive for most. Meanwhile, the rapid urbanization that accompanied industrialization brought its own set of challenges. Overcrowded tenements, poor sanitation, and widespread disease became the norm for working-class families. The divide between the wealthy industrialists and the laboring masses grew wider, setting the stage for social unrest and calls for reform. Yet, for the industrialists who seized the opportunities of this new age, the rewards were unparalleled. They became the architects of a modern economy, reaping fortunes that were previously unimaginable. But this newfound wealth was built on a foundation of exploitation and inequality. How did these conditions pave the way for the rise of the tycoons who would define an era? Let's take a closer look at the men behind the machines. Enter the industrial tycoons, men like Andrew Carnegie, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and John D. Rockefeller. These were not just entrepreneurs, they were empire builders. They saw the potential of the Industrial Revolution not just to transform society, but to amass unprecedented personal wealth. Andrew Carnegie, born into poverty in Scotland, emigrated to the United States as a young boy. He worked his way up from a bobbin boy in a textile factory to become the king of steel. His mantra of cut the prices, scoop the market, drove his competitors out of business. But it wasn't just ambition that fueled Carnegie's rise, it was ruthlessness. Carnegie's Homestead strike in 1892 exposed the darker side of his empire. When workers demanded better wages and conditions, Carnegie's lieutenant, Henry Clay Frick, called in private security forces to break the strike. Blood was shed, lives were lost, and the message was clear: profits over people. Cornelius Vanderbilt, meanwhile, dominated the railroads. Known as the Commodore, he built a transportation empire that connected the country. Vanderbilt's tactics were as aggressive as they were effective. He once famously shut down a key bridge, crippling a rival's business and forcing them to sell at a loss. To Vanderbilt, competition wasn't just business, it was war. And then, there was John D. Rockefeller, the oil magnate who turned Standard Oil into one of the most powerful monopolies in history. Rockefeller's strategy was simple: eliminate the competition. Through secret deals with railroads and undercutting his rivals, he controlled over 90% of the U.S. oil supply at his peak. His monopoly was so vast that it eventually led to the U.S. government intervening, breaking up Standard Oil in 1911. Yet, even in its fragments, Rockefeller's empire continued to thrive, and his personal fortune grew. These men became legends, but their legacies are complicated. Were they builders of modern America, or destroyers of fair competition and workers' rights? Let's dive deeper into the ruthlessness that defined their era. The Industrial Revolution was a battleground, not just for innovation but for dominance. These tycoons didn't just outwork their competition, They crushed them with relentless, often brutal tactics. Cornelius Vanderbilt epitomized this cutthroat approach. His philosophy was simple: control everything. He aggressively acquired railroads, sometimes bankrupting competitors in the process. When a rival wouldn't sell, Vanderbilt would lower his prices to unsustainable levels, driving them out of business entirely. To him, the end always justified the means. But it wasn't just competitors who suffered. Workers faced the brunt of these tycoons' ambitions. Strikes were met with hired militias, police crackdowns, and in some cases, outright violence. When Andrew Carnegie's workers at Homestead Steel demanded better wages and conditions, they were met with armed Pinkerton agents. The ensuing battle left several dead and many injured. Yet Carnegie maintained his focus on profits, claiming labor was just another cost to minimize. John D. Rockefeller, too, played his own ruthless game. Through secret agreements with railroads, he secured unfair advantages, ensuring that his competitors couldn't match his shipping costs. These so-called rebates crushed smaller oil producers. Rockefeller's Standard Oil empire became synonymous with monopoly power, forcing even the government to take action. But by the time the Sherman Antitrust Act dismantled Standard Oil, Rockefeller had already cemented his fortune, making him one of the wealthiest men in history. Public backlash grew as people began to see the human cost of these tycoons' methods. Monopolies stifled innovation and competition, while workers' rights were trampled in the name of efficiency. It was a period defined by exploitation, and yet, these men were hailed as captains of industry. But how do we reconcile their achievements with their actions? Did their contributions to society outweigh the damage they caused? The answer is as complicated as their legacies. The Industrial Revolution didn't just create wealth. It reshaped the very structure of society. But this transformation came at a staggering cost. Factories belched thick black smoke that blanketed cities, while rivers ran dark with industrial waste. The quest for profit left the environment and public health in ruin. For the working class, life was a daily struggle. Families were crammed into tiny tenements, sharing single rooms in buildings with little ventilation or sanitation. Diseases like cholera and tuberculosis spread rapidly in these conditions. Workers were seen as disposable, a resource to exploit, just like coal or iron. And then, there were the children. Young boys and girls worked in factories and mines, their small hands perfect for handling delicate machinery or squeezing through tight spaces. They endured long hours, hazardous conditions, and minimal pay, all to keep production costs low. In stark contrast, the industrialists enjoyed opulent lifestyles, building grand estates and hosting lavish parties. The wealth disparity was impossible to ignore. While one group lived in unimaginable luxury, another toiled endlessly just to survive. But the cost wasn't only human. The relentless drive for progress also devastated the natural world. Forests were clear-cut, waterways polluted, and wildlife habitats destroyed, all in the name of industrial expansion. These environmental consequences were largely ignored at the time, as profits outweighed preservation. Yet, the innovations of the Industrial Revolution laid the groundwork for the modern world. Railroads connected distant cities, oil powered new technologies, and steel built the skyscrapers that defined urban life. But these achievements beg the question, can progress truly be separated from its consequences? As we examine the legacy of this era, we must ask, was it worth it? And what lessons can we learn to avoid repeating history? Today, the Industrial Revolution is remembered as a turning point in human history. It sparked unprecedented economic growth, introduced groundbreaking technologies, and redefined how we live and work. But its legacy is far from simple. On one hand, the revolution created opportunities that lifted millions out of poverty. Mass production made goods cheaper and more accessible. Railroads connected distant cities, creating a truly global economy. The innovations of that era laid the groundwork for everything from skyscrapers to smartphones. On the other hand, the relentless pursuit of profit left lasting scars. Environmental destruction, wealth inequality, and the exploitation of labor were baked into the very systems that powered progress. These challenges didn't end with the Industrial Revolution. They evolved and persist to this day. Yet the lessons of the past have not been ignored. Today, conversations about sustainability, workers' rights, and corporate responsibility draw heavily from the experiences of that era. Billionaires like Bill Gates and Elon Musk cite industrial tycoons as their inspiration, but strive to leave behind a more balanced legacy. The Industrial Revolution reminds us that progress isn't inherently good or bad, it's what we choose to do with it. As we face modern challenges like climate change and automation, the question remains, can we innovate without repeating the mistakes of the past? The rise of industrialization transformed humanity's potential. It gave us the tools to shape the future, but also the responsibility to wield them wisely. The tycoons of yesterday may have built the foundations of the modern world, but the task of improving it falls to us. Will we rise to the occasion, or will history look back on our era with the same complicated lens? Only time will tell. The Industrial Revolution was more than machines and progress. It was a story of human ambition, for better or worse. And while the scars of greed remain, so too do the innovations that define our modern world. The question isn't just how these fortunes were built, but at what cost? What will history say about today's industrialists? Only time will tell. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of ambition and empire.